Hello and welcome to Racialized 506, an anti-racism podcast brought to you by the St. John Newcomers Center. My name is Bob Whitney and I will be your moderator. Our goal is to share the message of anti-racism through sharing stories of newcomers in our city, giving voices to those who are looking for the chance to speak. It is important to welcome newcomers in our community and any person minority from the community to hear their stories and challenges to raise awareness for anti-racism in order to create an accepting society. We will be joined by three guests who are going to share their experience and lead our discussion.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for another anti-racism conversation. This is the conversation we really want to have, and it's about time to have. And we're going to keep having these conversations. And we're really happy today to have beautiful guests with us. And I guess Bob is going to introduce them. Do you want to go ahead, Bob?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday. It's nice to see the sun out a little bit, and welcome. So tonight, the focus of the discussion is about the hijab and the significance and the symbolism of the hijab, both from the point of view of those who wear it and from those who don't, and for perhaps those who don't understand why people do choose to wear the hijab and what their ideas are. And just a couple of words about why that might be important. One aspect of information that's been quite common when we've looked at issues of race and racism in Canada, but also internationally, whether in Europe or in the United States, is that there's a very high level of discrimination, racism, actual physical abuse or threatening or verbal abuse or what is called microaggressions, especially targeted at women who wear the hijab, and even more so proportionally than men of other cultures or other races, or in this case, Muslim men. And that's simply because the hijab is a very visible symbol. When we see people who wear the hijab, and when we live in a country where the vast majority of women don't wear a hijab or religious coverings of any kind, then automatically wearing a hijab makes some people stand out. And for many people who don't know anything about Islam or don't know anything about the hijab, that can be something that they can simply wonder about in the best and most normal sense of the term. What does that mean? Why is she wearing it, etc.? But of course, given the context of the times, the media context, some of the international politics and discussions that are going on, of course, through popular media, there can be a lot of negative interpretations and understandings. And of course, we have the most dramatic examples recently, some of the so-called secularization laws or policies that are put into place, especially in France and also in Quebec, where women who wear the hijab, but also Jewish people or Sikhs or anyone who chooses to wear any kind of open religious clothing or symbols is banned from working in government jobs. And so that kind of what is sometimes called radical secularism is also becoming an issue. The idea that somehow if somebody chooses to wear a hijab or any religious clothing or symbol, that somehow that sets them apart from other people in society who don't. So of course the issue is complicated and also very much depends on where we live, how cosmopolitan it is. In the case of St. John, because fortunately from our point of view, I think it's safe to say the influx of people from Muslim communities around the world is a great contribution to New Brunswick and to St. John. But for many people who were born and raised here for generations, it's entirely new to see people and larger numbers of people walking in the streets, going to school, who are wearing the hijab. And so part of what we hope to do in this discussion tonight is to raise some awareness about why do people wear the hijab? Who are the people who wear the hijab. What does that symbolize, both in a positive sense for those who choose to wear it, and what might it mean for those who think that it is a symbol of oppression or a symbol of discrimination against women? Again, another recent poll indicated that many, many Canadians, non-Muslims of course, have this notion that Islam in particular discriminates against women, and that the hijab in particular is a symbol of the oppression of women in Islam. And that is a common perception, not based on accurate information as we know, but it is a common perception that people have. And again, at the most negative sense, that can sometimes mean that what we have is discrimination at different levels. So the purpose of tonight is to talk about that. The purpose is to raise awareness, share ideas, share experiences, and learn from each other in doing that. What I'll do very briefly is I'll mention our three speakers today and then hand it over to them. And I'll start with Paula Radwan. And Paula has always lived in St. John and graduated from St. John High School and later graduated from UNBSJ with a major in psychology, a minor in international studies, and a concentration in economics. She has worked extensively in finance, human resources, and management. Paula grew up as a Caucasian Canadian girl that practiced Christianity. It was not until 2010 that she accepted Islam and decided to start wearing the headscarf, the hijab. At that time, she was one of the only people wearing a hijab in St. John. She is very well connected to the newcomers and has even mentored some of them in business. She opened her restaurant, Taste of Egypt, in 2011, which specializes in Mediterranean food. She struggled with making the business successful, as it was a new cuisine in St. John when it was opened. She has worked on initiatives to help grow our community and has brought over people to work on work permits from Western Canada and has helped other businesses to do the same. She currently is running in the municipal election for St. John to be a councillor and does have some concerns that she will face some challenges being from a minority. Our other speaker tonight, Sadaf Anjam, and she was born in Pakistan. And when she was very young, her family moved to Ireland, which is where she spent the majority of her childhood. She then moved to St. John, New Brunswick with her family in 2010 and has since completed her Bachelor of Science as well as her Bachelor of Education, both at the University of New Brunswick. This fall, she will be going back to school to study medicine at Dalhousie Medical School here in St. John. And our third speaker, Noha Eshra. Noha has a degree in accounting from the University of Alexandria in Egypt. Her experience is in purchasing. She graduated high school from a German Catholic school in Alexandria. She speaks Arabic, English, and German. Noha moved to Canada with her family in 2018. She is an active community member, and she is an administrative assistant for the Department of History and Politics and Social Science at UNB here in St. John. So those are our three wonderful speakers, obviously with lots of experience and knowledge about our community and their own experience. And I think if no one minds, I am just going to arbitrarily decide who's going to go first. And if nobody really minds, I'm going to ask Paula to start. Paula.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you so much, Lena, for inviting me to speak today. I really appreciate all of the efforts that you guys are making on this very important subject. So I don't really have notes, so I'm just going to kind of go with my heart on this. I'll just give you a bit of a background about me. Bob had talked about how I had actually grown up as a Christian and that I did grow up as a Caucasian Christian. So I would have been growing up with my hair down and, short sleeves and shorts on, going to the beach in bathing suits. So I was very involved in the community from an early age. And, when I thought about speaking today on anti-racism, the word racism, of course, applies to your race. And I've not really experienced anti-racism, but I've experienced anti-discrimination. Or discrimination in general. So racism, I mean, I've never had an issue with my race because I am white. Unfortunately, I can say that I have probably benefited from being white, and that's not something that I agree with, but that's something that I do recognize. So basically, I grew up in school. Everything is, just like the majority of the community. I think the only time that I had any sort of discrimination growing up would have been, the odd female joke was made, but other than that, I never experienced any discrimination at all. Back in 2010, I ended up marrying my husband, who does happen to be from Egypt. And when we decided to get married, we actually had huge discussions about whether or not if we had children, if they would be Muslim or Christians. And of course, I knew that he would not be okay with his children being brought up Christian if we had any. So I ended up feeling very confident that it would be okay for them to be brought up as Muslim if we had any, which we didn't. So finally, after we got married, and even before that, actually, I knew a lot about Islam because I'd had a very close friend, especially in university, that used to talk to me about Islam a lot, and I would ask her a lot of questions. But for my poor husband, he had a lot of questions to answer. So I felt still that as somebody who did embrace religion, that if I had children, I would have an obligation to teach them religious values. So what I had decided to do is kind of do my research and figure out what values lined up with Islam, and that's what I would teach them. If there was anything that I figured that I would disagree with, then I would tell them to ask their father to save any confusion. So after that, during this research that I was doing, and I was I didn't study a lot of science, but I really embraced the science in Islam and decided to convert to Islam on my own without any pressure. I think that the most surprised person was my husband. And then after doing more research, I realized that it was actually in the Old Testament in the Catholic Bible that I had been brought up on that said that a woman should cover her head, or it's as though she shaved her head, which of course would have been considered, historically as a sin. So I had talked to priests and nuns before I accepted Islam, and it was really interesting because really there was nothing that they could say to convince me. Realizing that the hijab actually, like you would see the nuns, they would end up wearing their habit. This was something that was actually encouraged in Christianity. So before I accepted Islam, I actually started wearing the hijab. Now, the interesting and kind of funny thing about it is that I really didn't know how to put it on. And I felt kind of shy about asking how I should wear it. And I had mornings where I would be like trying to get up and get ready for work. And we were rushing because we were very busy business people and, trying to get everything in order. And I couldn't put it on. And so my poor husband would try to help me wrap my hijab, and he didn't know what to do. And I would say, how come you don't know how to do this? And he would say, well, because I don't wear the hijab. And so it's kind of funny that I had these challenges, but really, I remember crying because, it would be like being frustrated because you can't put on your sock in the morning. I couldn't get dressed the way that I wanted to get dressed. So, and why did I want to dress like that? It's not just because I had seen it in the Bible or I had read the ayahs, which would be the verses in the Quran about the hijab. It was because I really did genuinely want to dress modestly. I found great value in doing that. So, my whole life I go with pretty much zero discrimination. And then all of a sudden I put a piece of material over my head, and all of a sudden the looks start to change. The looks that I'm seeing in people's faces are changing. Some people would change because their look because they were surprised, I think. Some people were very curious, which there there was me as the only Caucasian in St. John that was wearing a hijab at the time. We did have a few girls from the Middle East that was wearing them, but you have to keep in mind the Syrians were not here back in 2012. So it was a very different scene here in St. John. I remember being in Costco one time looking for produce, and I don't know if you've ever felt like somebody is staring at you, but I looked over and I saw this man just glaring at me. And I thought, like, I kind of looked behind me to think, because I was thinking, like, he can't be looking at me like this. How could somebody be looking at me like this? So, and there was nobody behind me. Then my reaction was like to be like a Canadian that I always was. And, we're supposed to be friendly people. So I smiled at him. And it was interesting because when I did that, I gave him a big smile. He looked very surprised. And I think that I really get him thinking about, like, who is this person and what is she about? And that's what I'd hoped for anyway. So looks have definitely changed. And, it's funny. I remember when I was still struggling with wrapping the hijab and everything. I remember coming back from the mosque one day. We had gone for Friday prayer, and my husband was wearing the abaya, which would be your traditional clothing that you would wear in North Africa or in the Middle East. And I said, "Oh, Ihab, I need to stop in at Walmart." And of course, Walmart's very busy. And he said, "Well, I don't know if I will go in with you." And I said, "Well, why not? Like, why not? Yeah, come in with me." And he said, "Well, look at how I'm dressed. Everybody's going to look at me." And I went, "Hello?" Like, yes, everybody might look at you, but there's nothing wrong with the way you look, and you should be very comfortable. And if St. John is not on the bandwagon yet, they need to get on the bandwagon. So you just come with me with your hijabi wife going through Costco or Walmart at the time, and feel confident, because there's nothing wrong with the way you look. And we need to embrace culture. We need to embrace change. We need to embrace diversity. I had a couple of other incidences that were very public incidences, and I've gotten, messages over the years, so one day I was in one of the grocery stores, and I was just minding my own business, doing my shopping. And all of a sudden, there was a senior gentleman, that's an overstatement, actually. He hit my cart with his cart and told me to go back to my country. And, I, with the most New Brunswick accent that you could have, said, "I am in my country. I've always been in my country." So I just kind of smiled, because I didn't know what else to do. Frankly, it was probably more of an uncomfortable smile. And he also looked very confused. And I thought, well, I'm definitely getting people thinking, if nothing else. Then probably the most embarrassing of incidences happened on King Street. And it was down the hill from my business in front of Brunswick Square. There was a lot of people. It was lunchtime. There was a lot of people outside, and I was headed off to a business meeting. And so I was very focused on where I had to go and, what I wanted to, get accomplished at the meeting. And all of a sudden, this young male, I guess, I'm assuming, just started screaming at me and telling me, like, calling me a terrorist. And for anybody who knows me, that's probably the most foolish thing to call me. I mean, I could probably be called other things, but anybody who's really aggressive is probably not the word to use. And told me to go back to my country. And I had this, it was so sweet. I had this, I don't know if she's from St. John, but I just wish I could see her now. I had this senior lady walking up the hill with her walker. She looked fairly frail, and she's just said to me, "Dear," and she put her hand on my hand and said, "Some people shouldn't even be able to leave their house." And I just, it was, she didn't realize what kind of a comfort that was, but she wasn't making a scene on top of his scene, but she was just trying to make me feel better. And it did. Like, it really worked. So those are probably the biggest incidences that I've had. Most recently, being a little bit more in the public eye, I haven't really experienced anything too badly yet, but I am getting some emails full of Islamophobia. And, that's unfortunate, but unfortunately, I'm not really surprised. The media has wreaked havoc on those sorts of issues. And I think that these sort of things are so important because we just need to be able to communicate with people. I don't think that people really mean to discriminate like this a lot of the time, but it's a lack of understanding. I can think of an incident actually I had standing in line in one store. A young child said to me, "Why do you have that on your head?" And the mother was just mortified. Of course, the little one is totally just curious. And so I said, "Oh no, you know what? That's okay. I'm perfectly comfortable with answering that. And you know what? I love it when I get questions like that out of curiosity." So I let them know I wear it for my religion, and I didn't want to get into great detail with somebody who was around the age of 5 or 6, so, and I choose to wear it. You should be able to choose what you can wear. So anyway, the mother was like totally relieved because she was mortified over this young child. But I said, there's nothing wrong with curiosity. And there's not, and people have asked me so many times, why do you wear the hijab? I'm sorry. They've also said to me, I'm sorry that your husband made you do this. And that is so far from the truth. My husband is not aggressive. He is just very supportive. But, of course, he does say some things, to advise me because he cares and he worries about my well-being. But I think it's these kind of conversations that definitely, help to break down these barriers. So anyway, if anybody has any questions after, I'm happy to answer them, but I know you'll have other speakers. But thank you for doing this.
Thanks so much, Paula. So next, why don't we hear from Noha? Noha?
Yeah, so hijab, I loved your story, by the way, Paula. Thank you for sharing it. And thank you, Lena and Bob, for doing this. Hijab for me was, and actually still is, and I always considered it kind of a badge of honor. I feel like princesses usually wear tiaras, and hijab is actually my own tiara. I feel like a kind of a walking symbol of obedience to God, because God ordered us to wear it. And so I love wearing it, and I feel I'm in a special connection with God, and I feel it's kind of a representation to Islam. I hope we don't wear it along close family members, but we're supposed to wear the hijab or cover, except for our face and hands. So we actually at home we usually don't wear it because some people actually thought we always have it on. Hijab actually tells a lot about me without me even having to speak it out. So when people see me in my hijab, they know I'm kind of not interested in any casual relationships. I don't drink alcohol. I don't eat pork. If we're posing for a group photo, please keep distance. Don't just assume if I shake hands. Please ask first. So it does speak on my behalf. And yeah, it gives me the feeling and the confidence that I'm not here to impress anyone. This is who I am, and I want people to connect with me for who I am and how I present myself, not for how I look. Just connect with the inner person, not the outer. So when I started when I thought of wearing my hijab, I was kind of young. When I told my mom about it, she was totally against it. And she said, no, she thought I'd changed my mind, or maybe in a couple of weeks I'll tell her, no, I'm done or that. So I'm not interested anymore. And certainly she felt I might not be able to face the challenges at school because I attended a Catholic school, right? So, and nuns actually, although they covered as well, as Paula said, they still did not support us when we were our hijab. And there were only the 5 of us maybe within the whole school. There were 400 students maybe. So we were very kind of certainly a minority. So, but what I want to say here is that when I shared the story with other Muslims or other hijabis, many of them told me that they had the same issue too, and they had to kind of convince their families to wear the hijab. While many people think that we are forced to wear it and people around us wear it, which is totally not the truth. Islam is an act of the heart. So if I do it to please an imam or to please my husband or my father, it lost its meaning. Where I'm supposed to do it because I'm convinced to do it. So no one is to force me to wear it. Yeah, it takes a lot of strength to wear the hijab. So it's clearly a sign of strength, not a sign of oppression, seeing how many people are usually attacked just for wearing the hijab, just for looking different. So, and the idea of the oppression is actually now very common in the media. And although there is no ground to it, and there is no historical evidence that women who wear the hijab are oppressed, it's spread in the media and they're still talking about it. But yeah, no one ever, I don't believe anyone cared to ask hijabis if they feel oppressed or not. Bob mentioned what's happening in France and maybe in Quebec too. But I believe if you're following the news, you see hijabis demonstrating against it. If they actually didn't want it, they would be happy that finally they are banning hijab and they would be happy about it. But this is not the case. So yeah, sadly, it's always portrayed that, hijabis are oppressed and they don't actually know the amount of rights Muslim women have. I was kind of shocked when I heard or when I first learned about the women's suffrage movements and how they just got the right to vote in the 1940s, 70s. We have this right long ago. No one actually knows that. No one actually knows how many rights Muslim women have and practice. It's the media just portrays or kind of shows Muslim women as oppressed women. So as Paula maybe mentioned a couple of kind of sad incidents that she's been through, and I'm sorry you had to go through this. But yeah, a sad fact is I'm kind of used to people staring at you or at me, or used to people trying to avoid you. Yeah, I had an incident where I was walking in a hallway and there was nothing, no doors, nothing in this hallway, just lockers. And I was the only one there, and a gentleman just was crossing. When the minute he saw me, he kind of freaked out, and I felt like he's reaching to hide in the locker. And this was, he definitely discovered he cannot do this, but his impression when he saw me for the first time, he really freaked out. What can I say? It's sadly, maybe they don't know enough. They don't have enough channels to learn from about Muslim women or about others. But yeah, and certainly there are sometimes emotional harassment, sometimes it's physical, sometimes. So yeah, maybe just once a gentleman asked me, we met, and just a couple of weeks ago we were introduced. We didn't have anything, actually, any other communication. And the next time he met me, he asked me, so were you forced into marriage? I was kind of shocked of the question, and I didn't relate at all. Don't know, but it took me maybe a couple of days to realize what he was referring to. I was reading an article, and then I read the headlines of how Muslim women are oppressed. And then I thought, oh, maybe this is what he's referring to. And yeah, it's just sad to see this happening. It's another incident but this was honestly not in Canada, but it happens all over the world. It was in a European country, and I was in line. I was young at this age. I was maybe 18 then. And I just standing in line for the cashier. And when it was my turn, the lady said, next. And she just pointed to the person behind me. And he just came forward. Oh, I told her, I was next. And she said, I thought you were with the group over there. And she pointed to another department. There were hijabis there, but certainly not with me. And they were far away. And the gentleman actually went, and they started actually doing his, going through his cart. It shocked me at first. When I talked with other friends, they said, yes, this is quite common, but you have to stand for your rights. So being a hijabi actually means to stand for your own rights and not fearing sadly we face some inconvenient situations, but I'm not giving up my hijab for it. I love it, and I'm always proud of it.
Okay, thank you, Noha. Okay, so finally, our third person to talk tonight is Sadaf. So Sadaf, please say what you would like to say tonight.
everyone. So thanks so much for having me today. I think this is such an important conversation, and I hope that this conversation continues after today as well. For the sake of time, I wanted to share two specific experiences that I had, and then try to focus on some of the things that I think we can do to help support the hijabis in the community. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was something that happened to me pretty regularly in university, and this was during my first undergrad degree. And basically what happened was that I had a friend who would jokingly call me a terrorist, and he would do this pretty frequently. And a lot of the times this would be in public and in front of like quite a few people. But because I didn't really want to make it a scene or feel like I was a victim, I would kind of brush it off and just let it go, because I would tell myself that, oh, this is a friend. So it was okay. It was a joke. But the reason I wanted to share that story was because I think there's a lot that you can learn even from just that one small experience. I think a lot of the times we have this idea that racism comes from strangers, or they come from people who are ignorant and that they don't know better. But the reality is that it can come from people who are just as close to us. It can come from family and friends. And just because they are your family and friends doesn't mean that they should have a free pass to even like jokingly behave like that, because all that does is normalize sort of treating Muslims, hijabis, and all minorities really for all minorities like that. And in that way, if you let that sort of pass, eventually things can escalate and they can actually turn into like real intentional hate crimes. So there was that. And then the other thing that really stood out for me when I was reflecting on that experience was the fact that there were a lot of other people around that I could tell they could hear what was happening, but no one ever like stood up or corrected it and said like, that's not okay. And to me, that really showed how much further we really have to go. And of course, there's lessons in that for me too, because I should have been confident enough to be able to stop that. And I feel like after going through so many similar experiences and growing up and maturing and becoming more confident, I know that now if something like that did happen, I would absolutely be able to stand up for myself. But a lot of people aren't at that level, and a lot of people never get to that stage. So it's just something I think we need to be super mindful of, that sort of thing happens. It happens here. It happens not just by strangers, it happens by people who are close to us. So that was the first thing. And then just quickly, the second thing is something that happens frequently, and it still happens pretty regularly. And it's just the random sort of ignorant comments that you sometimes get from strangers. And for me, the most frequent one that I have been getting is when someone asks you like where you're from. And I have absolutely no problem with that question. But the problem I have is in the response that sometimes you get. So usually if someone asks me where I'm from, I'll respond with, I was born in Pakistan, but I moved to Ireland when I was a year old and I lived there for 15 years. But even though I would like really emphasize the fact that I grew up in Ireland, the common response would always be like, oh, like your English is so good. And that can, like, when you hear that so often, it gets really frustrating, because I don't think, first of all, you should ever have to like downplay your roots and where you're from. And then secondly, like it's just a very like racist assumption to have that anyone who does wear the hijab they must not be from here, or they speak poor English, or they must be uneducated or whatnot, which of course we know that that's not true. But that story kind of shows me the need for greater representation of hijabis in our community, so that we can start normalizing the fact that, we are just like everyone else here, and we're just as intelligent and worthy of respect. And so those were the two I wanted to mention quickly. But I wanted to spend the rest of the time that I have to talk about some of the things that I think we can do to better support hijabis in the community. And I wanted to kind of break that down into two parts. So the first part is some of the things that I think the non-Muslim community members can do, and then focus a little bit on some of the things that the Muslim community members can do, because both of them I think are just as important and things that need to be considered. So for the non-Muslim community, I think that the most important thing in my opinion is to first educate yourself about what the hijab actually is and why some Muslim women choose to wear it, so that you can correct some of the prejudices that you or your family or friends might have. And a lot of the times you don't even realize that you're holding those prejudices. So that's why it's important to really teach yourself and learn. And one of the things I did in preparation of this talk was I actually reached out on my social media to ask a couple of questions about the hijab. And one of the questions that I asked was how people would rate their current knowledge about the hijab. And I thought that was super interesting because there were over 100 responses that I got, but only 11% said that they would feel comfortable having a meaningful conversation about the hijab. And obviously, like, those aren't like official statistics or anything like that, but I do think that there's still a lot that you can learn from that, because 11% is so small, and that again is telling me that we need to be doing a better job of educating ourselves and each other. And then there's a lot of ways I think that we can educate ourselves. So I did reach out again and I asked, like, what would be some suggestions for how you would prefer to learn more about the hijab? And 56% of them said that they would really like having a reading list that is curated for them specifically by Muslim women. And so maybe that's something that the Muslim women in the community can take that initiative to create for the non-Muslim community members. And then 25% also said that they would like to attend a talk or a discussion similar to the one we're having today. So that's really awesome. So yeah, education I think is really important and can do wonders. So I think that's one of the main things we should focus on. And then the second point that I wanted to sort of highlight was that I think we need to improve the representation of hijabis in all aspects of life in our community as well. And there's a lot of ways that can be done as well. For example, if you're a reader, I'm a big reader as well, an easy way to kind of increase that representation is by reading more books that have hijabi representation, or books that are written by Muslim women or women who wear the hijab. But also, I think that there needs to be a greater push for representation in schools, because that's where, you know, most of the youth are spending most of their time, and that's where they're learning so much. So if teachers took on a greater responsibility of ensuring that those Muslim women who wear the hijab are feeling like they're being seen, I think that would be extremely beneficial. And because I have like my background in teaching, I kind of brainstormed some ways that could happen inside the classroom. And it's a lot easier than you might think. I know I'm running short on time, so just quickly for the Muslim community members, I think one of the things we can do is make sure that there are supports for Muslim women in the community at every age level. So, for example, the university level, I think that it's so important for every single university to have a Muslim student association. And that's something that I really regret not starting while I was at UNB, because there were a lot of hijabis on campus, but because we didn't have a lot of the same classes together, we wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to talk and like meet up. But having that support system is invaluable, and something that I really think that I was missing and could have benefited from. And then just the last thing, because I think it's important not to just like point fingers at others, but we also have to look at what we're doing ourselves in our community and acknowledge some of the prejudices that we have about the hijab as well. The most common one that I have gotten is when, you know, other Muslims kind of point the finger at hijabis and say that you're not wearing the hijab the correct way. And I think for me, the hijab is such a personal decision. It's a decision between yourself and God, and only you can decide how you want to represent that. And anytime that I have personally been criticized about, you know, wearing the hijab, like styled differently, it would really leave me feeling like quite bitter and disheartened and resentful almost. And for a while, when I did get those comments, it damaged my relationship with the hijab. And so just acknowledging that, those prejudices do exist within our own community, and that we're not immune to having those kind of negative thoughts as well. I think I'm just about over time, so I will stop it right there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the three of you. Just a couple of brief points. One of the interesting surveys I read a short time ago to support a couple of points here is that while the province of Quebec and in France have instituted laws against wearing religious symbols, the hijab being the most prominent one survey in Canada said that in all likelihood, all the other provinces would do that as well if there were politicians willing to do it. Now, for different reasons that have to do with the history of Quebec and the history of France, those policies have been implemented. But the point of this survey was to say there are many people in this country outside of those provinces that share those same prejudices that exist in a place like Quebec or in France for different reasons. So that's something worthwhile to, I think, be aware of, that yes, those kind of laws and discrimination could happen anywhere. And the other point before we get to the discussion is I think it's extremely important, the point about how humor can mask racism and how, yes, we hear the horrible, verbal, overt abuse, but that often people can use humor as a way to hide behind the prejudices that they have. And they think it's funny, and they think they're maybe lightening the tension or whatever, however they justify it. But the point is, it is another form of expressing racist prejudices. And I certainly just in other contexts have often heard humor in that sense used in that very cutting edge, hurtful way. And yet the person doing it thinks that perhaps they're not doing any harm. So that's, I think, a very important point. And all three of you have made important points. So thank you. Let's have a discussion now.
Thank you so much. And maybe I can read, there's a couple of comments here in the chat, but first I really want to thank all the guests today. You were absolutely amazing, really inspiring. This is why we're having these kind of conversations to spread awareness, to hopefully help others as well down the road, and hopefully eliminate the wrong common impressions from the community and the society, which is not acceptable. So thank you so much. And Nohai, I loved when you mentioned hijab as a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. There are a couple of comments here. These are such great ideas. We all have responsibility to support the Muslim minorities in our community. If you see something, say something and fight for representation. Thanks, Sadaf. That's from Aline. And Zahra said, I guess I agree what you're saying, Sadaf. We are not allowed to talk about religion directly, but you can bring awareness to good ethics and good manners that Islam stands for. And Sarah mentioned, I really love the idea for UNBSJ. I myself have never thought of something like that. And in my field, there are barely minorities that I talk to. Thank you to all amazing guests. This was super insightful. MashaAllah, amazing ideas, Sadaf. So these are the comments from the chat. And once if you guys want to put something in the chat, I'll read them. If you guys have any questions, comments, yes, Rodrigue, please go ahead.
Thank you for all that. It was very interesting to listen to all three of you because you brought different perspectives to the same issue. I was wondering, because I think the general public, and me included, confuse the hijab with the burqa and other types of face coverings. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how these are perceived and how we should, because I think when Canadians see the hijab, I think some just go straight to the burqa and think of those situations, and maybe I'm completely wrong, as situations where women don't have choice. You can refute what I'm saying. I'm not well versed in how the burqa is used. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, and I'm just directing it to anyone who wants to speak on it.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a little bit challenged with reading Quran because I don't speak Arabic. I know a few phrases here and there, so I end up having translated versions. But it has always been my understanding from the verses that I've read through translation that there is guidance actually in how the hijab is worn, so that you're covering parts of your body is not exposed as well. Like there's specifics in there. There's also a verse in the Quran. I don't know exactly how it is said. Noha might be able to confirm it a little bit better, but that does say that from a distance that a woman looks like a crow. And I think that's where some of the perception is my understanding where the niqab comes into play. That is one of the verses, only one. I have some family members in North Africa that do wear the niqab. And although I have not had interest in wearing the niqab myself because I don't think it's an order, I look at it and it's my understanding that it is something extra that you could do, but I support anybody who wants to do that. And quite interestingly enough, since COVID has happened, we all look like we're wearing a niqab. You know, we've all got the masks on. Even the guys look like they're wearing the niqab. So this sort of impression that people always had that you can't go into a bank covering your face and you can't be out in public covering your face because you could scare people, you could attack people. People are not getting attacked with these masks on. So alhamdulillah, thank God for that. But, you know, I'm all for supporting other women. And I think that we need to lift up other women in their, you know, their challenges that they have in the things that they want to do. And I'm all in support for anybody who wants to wear the niqab. Now, the other thing is you were actually using the word burqa. Now, the burqa would typically be the whole covering that would come over that you would, where the niqab could actually be like a covering that comes over your face so that you would end up seeing the eyes. But there is a little bit of a difference there, and it, you know, and it's me, you know, I mean, it's somewhat cultural, but obviously they're trying to do the extra things as a Muslim woman. So I'm in total support of it for anybody who wishes to take the extra steps.
Allow me to add to it. It might be shocking for you to hear that, but honestly, when I grew up, I kind of had the same impression, to fear people with niqab, and I honestly never had the experience to have any relatives or people I deal with until I kind of grew up. And then I was shocked of how nice and sweet they're just normal people. Saying that Salaf mentioned that we're kind of working hard to prove to people around us that we're normal. And this is kind of frustrating too. So they are just normal people like anyone else. They chose to do that. I understand that the media always portrays the people with burqa are oppressed and we should go save them and we're the Superman who saves the whole world. No one ever talked to them. I didn't see them demonstrating against it. I see people now demonstrating in China, asking the world to save them, or they're being tortured as Muslim and genocide happening in China and in India, and no one just cares. They don't even care about it. So, I mean, in the media, not you, I previously were thinking or caring about Muslim women. They never talked to or never asked them if they really feel they need to be saved. Yeah, it's my understanding is people who wear the niqab, they kind of feel it's a special connection. It's not an obligation.
I think I'll just add to, if I can. Like I said, I've been having a lot of conversations this past week online with some friends and about the hijab and the burqa and all of those things. And one of my friends actually reached out and said that she was super comfortable with being around other hijabis, but that she did not feel comfortable approaching a woman in the burqa or in the niqab. And I asked her if she have you been around anyone who wears the niqab or the burqa? And she said that no, she had never seen someone in person wearing that. And I thought that was super interesting too, because, there's this fear of something when you're not exposed to it. And so that's why I think a huge part of it, again, comes down to the importance of representation. And, if we do start representing people who not just who wear the hijab, but also the burqa and the niqab, it will make people learn more about it and hopefully take away some of the fear of the unknown.
There's a school in Moncton that received a couple of years ago 2 Iraqi girls, and one of whom, I think only one of them, wore the niqab. And the school initially was, what do we do? And so, and of course, there was this resistance, but as soon as that we went through the whole process of discussing of how it was, and that it was her choice, and the parents and the family supported her, and then and of course, 80% of the teaching workforce are women, so they embraced her. Is the short story of a longer story, because she felt very comfortable to take her niqab off when she was speaking to the principal, who's a woman, or the vice principal, who's a woman, or to her homeroom teacher, or to any woman. And so they made a connection with them very quickly. But once they got over the initial, what is that, they did make the connection. So your point is well taken, Sadaf, about having representation is very helpful because it takes down all kinds of barriers we imagine are there.
Thank you so much, Rodrigue. And I just want to read a couple of comments from the chat, and then Zohra she want to say something. Aline mentioned, I think it goes back to educating yourself. Ignorance begets more ignorance. So as Sadaf said, educating ourselves is the first step and is so important. We are naturally predisposed to fear anything we see as other. So learning about hijab and niqab and the burqa is so important when it comes to dismantling these kinds of prejudices too. And as Noha also said, talk to Muslim women. Don't get your facts from media. And Sarah said, I feel as if after the pandemic started, that the niqabis have gotten their due. Thank you so much for your comments. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Oh, Zohra is back. Hey, Zohra, you want to go ahead?
Always wondering if people are actually interested to know what is in your head or what is in your on your head, because it's two different things. You are the same person and you are there to serve, working for a school, working centers, or working outside with public. It's the same person, actually. It doesn't change anything about your ethics, about your religion, about your culture, about your way you perceive things and the way you behave with people. Of course, there is a lot of work to do. I just catch up on Sadaf talking. Unfortunately, I missed the other two. I do apologize. I do agree with Sadaf. We need to do a lot of awareness. It's not only the other person who does not know us. We should introduce ourselves. We should go another mile to meet people and talk to them and ask and actually answer their questions. They have a lot of questions. Yeah, it is our responsibility, and I think it's their responsibility to come to meet us too, and we meet in the middle and we talk about a lot of things and we introduce ourselves and we know about their cultures and we know about everything that they introduce too. It's part of our richness in Canada, so you can know and give your what you have. Thank you for the time you gave me.
Thank you so much, Zohra. There is a comment here. I'm going to read. Mariam, I often have alignment talks with my manager and coworkers at work. She's Canadian and she tells me that Canadians live in their own bubbles and whatever they don't know scares them and they don't seek knowledge when they see someone or something different or new around them. I missed a comment just before Mariam's. I don't know how. I think sometimes it moves quickly. Hey, I am Himani. Well, I came here from India. The way I put my dupatta, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, was kind of similar as we wear hijab, so that I can cover my head properly. But we are like, are you Muslim? Why don't you wear dupatta like Muslims? I wear like, wait, what? Is that actually make sense? You are judging somebody just the way they put dupatta. There is a comment from Sarah. Some books written by Muslimas about Muslimas Does My Head Look Big in This by Randa Abdel Fattah. It's young adult fiction. And Aisha at Lost by Uzma Jalaluddin. It's adult fiction. I actually virtually got to meet Uzma in February via the Lorenzo Society, and she was awesome. Thank you for sharing.
It's interesting. I get the question all the time, where are you from? And a lot of the time that's curiosity, and I have no problem answering that. But it's interesting that I feel that, maybe it's just people trying to get educated, and that's good. It's good to have those conversations. I think most of the time it's not like, people don't mean anything bad from it, but sometimes I feel like there is a disconnect. I think like I don't know if you've really dealt with too many people from Lebanon. Like, do you know that there's like lots of Christians in Lebanon, like that are non-hijabis? And, so what is that? It's a stereotype. It's a huge stereotype of, I seem to fit into this mold sometimes and that mold sometimes. And to me, there is no mold. So it's just, there's such a huge spectrum of people worldwide. So it's kind of interesting.
I like that, yeah. I like that. Thank you,
I'll simply add that I know several Black New Brunswickers that sometimes when they're walking through the city market or uptown, someone will also say, well, where are you from? And they'll say, well, my family's been here for 200 years. But the assumption is, of course, that because they're Black, they must come from. So, and they're being asked that by other people from St. John, who've also probably been here for 200 years. So that might show, a level of awareness. I'm a historian, but a lack of awareness of history, that there are people who don't know that there have been, people from Black people in New Brunswick for, since New Brunswick and Canada's ever been here.
We came to the end of our conversation. I want to thank you all for coming today. I'm sure you have more questions. Same here, but we have to be mindful of the time. That was great. I hope we do that again and more often, participate more and more, and do some of the suggestions Sadaf had earlier. It looks like everybody liked it, so we should be doing something for sure. And yeah, don't hesitate to ask, like Noha said.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy your weekend.
You have been listening to Racialized 506 by the St. John Newcomers Center. A huge thank you to our listeners and a huge thank you to our guests. By sharing their stories, they create a space to build an understanding of anti-racism and how we can do our part in making a more equal world. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode with our next guests. You may visit our website, www.sjmrc.com, for bonus content. Until next time.